Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the PH Journals podcast. It has been a minute. It's been a while. I do apologize that I haven't touched base with you guys a lot sooner. However, a lot's been happening, closing out the season. It's been a hectic couple of days, and I'm forever grateful, but at the same time, I do miss it. I miss being back in studio. It's pretty awesome. I've got some upgraded gear. We've got the beautiful lights that have come in. I'm super pumped up about that. We've got a couple more upgrades to add to the studio before the end of the year, and I'm super excited. Guys, before we get into it, like always, analyzing the podcast and see how far we've come in such, not a short space of time, but in such a significant space of time. It still amazes me to see how many people download and listen to the podcast, and I'm so grateful for that. But unfortunately, a lot of my listeners, more than 65 to 67% of my listeners don't subscribe to my channel. So I know it's a pain in the ass, and I know everyone asks this, and I know all the content creators say this at the end of their video, at the beginning and in the middle and all that sort of stuff. But guys, please, really, if you're listening or watching this on any one of my social media platforms or any one of my listening platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Play, wherever it may be, guys, please just subscribe to the channel. It really helps us in the longevity of this whole thing. I don't earn a single cent off podcasting. However, we are bringing in ads now that we monetized in the next couple of weeks. But with that being said, every subscription, every like, every interaction really just helps with the algorithm. You guys know how it is. And when we are out here trying to project our content across so many different platforms, it's a lot better to be heard through the loyal ones of the subscribers, the listeners, and all that sort of stuff. So firstly, I'm forever grateful that you still find so much value in this channel. Our downloads haven't dropped, which is absolutely incredible. I'm forever grateful. But if you don't mind, it literally takes less than maybe 10 seconds to hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications. And of course, if you enjoyed or if you didn't enjoy, interact with this episode. It really goes a long way to help. So now that I've got that out of the way, without further ado, let's get into this week's episode of the podcast. So guys, if you haven't yet figured it out, Kimberley High Court has released probably one of the most significant newses. I don't even know if that's the right word of saying it, but one of the most significant rulings as far as rhino conservation is concerned that we have seen in a very long time. Now, if you don't mind me, I've broken this podcast episode. This was all going to be about why I believe content creators, influencers, however you want to see us on different social media platforms, why do we have to justify kills, right? Why do we have to label high fence, label free range, label public land and all that sort of stuff? I'll get into that a little bit later. Because this was breaking news, literally on the 31st of October, Kimberley High Court released a statement that it was going to rule in favor of captive-bred rhino horn trade. Now, I'm going to dissect what this really means. It's taken me a couple of days to break this all down, and I'm quite happy with what I've been able to pull off the internet and really give my own perception on it. Because while this is a massive victory for rhino conservation, there is a bit of a gray area around it. It's got CITES involved. There's a whole bunch of different things. I'm going to read as much of this as I possibly can because I believe that I have to be as accurate as I can from the internet to try and give a realistic approach on what this actually really means for conservation. And with that being said, I will give my own opinion on it, and then you guys can take whatever it may be from this episode on this specific topic. So, without further ado, in a landmark decision in the Northern Cape High Court in Kimberley, has ruled that registered conservation breeding operations in South Africa can now apply to export rhino horn legally under strict permit conditions. This ruling doesn't suddenly open the floodgates for international trade, but it does create a pathway for legal regulated movements of horn that's been harvested ethically from live captive bred rhino. So I've pulled all this information and I've kind of dissected it and I've put it into my own words. But like I said, I want to read this so I stay accurate as possible. Rhino horn is made of keratin. Keratin. That's embarrassing. And I know this. Rhino horn is made of keratin, the same stuff that your hair and nails are made. It grows back naturally. When trimmed, it doesn't harm the animal whatsoever. We've seen it time and time again. There's numerous amounts of videos out there where rhinos get dehorned for their own safety from poachers. And a lot of those rhino horns that have been taken off, especially from the large breeders of rhino, they just get put away in vaults and pretty much gets stockpiled, kind of. So what does a high court ruling mean? Export permits must be issued for horn coming from a registered conservation breeding facility. No import permit is required from the receiving country, at least under the South African jurisdiction. And the MEC must decide on issuing certificates within 7 days. I'll get back to that MEC part. In short, I personally believe that the court is saying let's just stop wasting a renewable regulated conservation asset that we have. We also need to take away from the fact that this doesn't mean that the international ban on rhino horn trade has been lifted. CITES regulations are still in play. What it does mean is that South Africa's conservation model is shifting away from total restriction and towards a system that might fund conservation through legal means. If it doesn't pay, it doesn't stay. Remember that. After 50 years of bans, the poaching numbers haven't gone down enough. We've spent millions fighting illegal activity, and it's time to test something completely different. Something that could bring community benefit, rural employment, and a better funding for protection. But this is not without debate. Some NGOs fear that legal trade could fuel black markets or blur enforcement lines. Others argue that if done right, this could finally turn poachers into protectors. Without a word of a lie, this is an incredible, pivotal moment in South African conservation fight against rhino poachers. Apologies. So I pulled some stats. So some of the key takeaways that I would like to highlight. Let's start off here. Okay. One of the big fundamental factors in why this hasn't happened a lot sooner is because of the pushback from the NGOs, from rhino protection organizations and conservation programs, right? Now, please, guys, when I talk about this, I'm merely just generalizing. There are a lot of rhino conservation organizations that do a lot of good in communities, in anti-poaching. They really put feet on the ground, and they are an exceptional asset to have as far as fighting conservation is concerned. However, there's a large majority of foundations and conservation programs that are literally funded and don't do anything. I'm going to give you guys some numbers, and this is based off of last year's financial report. International Rhino Foundation reported that more than $4.8 million in total revenue for last year's fiscal year. The program expenses are estimated to be at $3.9 million. I'll highlight why that's a little bit blurry a little bit later. Another organization, Save the Rhino International, reported that their year from the 1st of April 2023 to the 31st of March 2024, they awarded more than 3.8 million British pounds in grants to rhino programs globally. A 5-year rhino board issued by World Bank in 2022 for 2023 in South Africa had a normal amount of $150 million, although this is not an annual funding, but rather a capital raise over multiple years. So this is from 2022 to 2024. Okay, so they raised the capital of 150, excluding all the other stuff. I then pulled stats on what it really costs per rhino as far as conservation is concerned. Bear in mind, okay, and in South Africa, there are high volume of privately owned rhino, like mentioned in this ruling in Kimberley. So this is per every single rhino population. It is estimated to be $1,125 to $10,000 per rhino per year. On a private reserve, this can drop down to almost $270 per rhino. Some of the key takeaways that I've taken. The figures above show that tens of millions are going into rhino conservation annually via NGOs and specific programs, but they do not represent the total global funding across all governments, private reserves, NGOs, community efforts, and private investors. The $150 million Rhino bond is a large multi-year instrument, and it is not an annual budget, so they don't receive that 150 every single year. This is where it gets tricky for me. In 2024, a total of 420 rhinos were poached in South Africa. In 2023, that figure was 499. In 2022, that figure was 454. In 2021, that figure was 428. So there's a absolute there's a consistency of fluctuation in the numbers that we pulled. These numbers were pulled from the government of South Africa, SAMParks figures from 2021 and from 2021 to 2025. Apologies, guys. I'm stumbling over my words here. I'm just trying to get as accurate as I possibly can because I don't want any of these figures to be blurred when processing this podcast. Okay, so now that I've given you the stats, I know it's a lot to it's a lot to fathom and it's a lot to take in. But this is where I bring into my conclusion on why I believe that this ruling in Kimberley is a lot greater than what we can ever anticipate. So number one, these NGOs are receiving massive amounts of funding on a yearly basis, right? Where this funding goes, I'm pretty sure we can only account for roughly about 20% of that. Now, please, guys, what I'm trying to say is that the stats I've pulled and the calculations I've gone through, it gets ChatGPT, Grok, SAMParks, all these programs that these facilities that I've pulled from, all give me skewed numbers on how much poaching costs in different things. They estimate between 50% of the costs can be accounted for. I think that number is inflated a hell of a lot. I personally believe that we can only account for roughly about 20% of that spend. What that means for the greater scheme of things is what is happening to the rest of that money. Now that money is funding is funding individuals out there. These NGOs have been set up. They've been reliant on poachers to poach these animals so that they can stay funded, so they have a purpose of an income. Now I'm generalizing again, and like I said, and I'm going to reiterate this, there are a lot of very good NGOs out there that run rhino conservation programs that do a lot of good. There are a lot of them out there. But for the greater prospect of this, I personally believe that the vast majority of them, the ones that are receiving hefty amounts of payouts from Bill Gates and numerous amounts of other celebrities, public figures, governments, institutions, companies, what is happening to the rest of that money? Now, these people have relied on these animals being poached so they can carry on being funded constantly. I'm not saying their intentions are bad. I'm just saying that they've been brought into a system. They've developed a system around this funding, and that is how they've based their lifestyle on. So take the funding away, these people walk away from their jobs, and they don't have a paycheck at the end of the day to receive and walk out there. Now, this has a massive negative impact. What happens to all the anti-poaching? Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen in the next year or so. It's going to take a number of years for us to really bring the number of rhino poaching down, because I think this win in Kimberley is a massive step in the right direction. Now, there was a company that or not a company, but a program that I reached out to that I want to get the name here. It was, I sent them a message the other day. I'm gonna butcher it if I even if I try. I want to say it was Rockwood Conservation that we've been fighting. Yes, Rockwood Conservation. I reached out to them on Facebook. I haven't had a respond back. I would love to have them on the podcast. If any one of their members is listening to this, please guys reach out to me. I would love to have you guys on the podcast, because I know you guys have been actively fighting for the legalization of rhino horn. Now, because this makes sense, right? If it's the same product that your fingernails are made out of, we've had conflicting amounts of data that says between 4 to 6 or 7 years the rhino horn is fully grown back, and that way we can keep harvesting it, pretty much like I want to use the same analogy as milking a cow, I guess. But this gets sold, floods the market gets flooded, the demand for rhino horn decreases, the poacher's value decreases, it doesn't become a high risk value item. That way the profits valued on the rhino horn aren't as high as what they currently are. Hence, it becomes too risky to poach rhino, and the numbers hopefully get halted at some point. I'm not going to say it's going to get eradicated, but it's definitely going to bring it down a hell of a lot. That's just my personal opinion. That's what I've been fighting for. That is my perception on the whole ordeal. So, with that being said, what happens, the ripple effect, is that when the poaching starts decreasing, all these foundations are going to have to start looking elsewhere for funding, or they're going to close their institutions, walk away, and we are going to be left with a number of individuals without jobs, which is a sad reality we have to fight, we have to face. But in the same breath, to be honest with you, I would much rather see a positive outcome for the rhino than worrying about a couple of hundred jobs that might get lost, because I feel that those people are so well trained and so well looked after that they will be able to slot into any anti-poaching unit for a number of different causes or whatever it may be. So my concern is not too much there, but rather more about the animals. Let's get in them into the right space. So guys, massive news coming out of Kimberley. I hope I've been able to dissect this as well as I possibly could. Look, there's going to be so much development on this story. I would definitely reach out to Rockwood again to try and have them onto the podcast so that we can talk a little bit more about it in depth and really get their perception on it, because I think that's a very important one. I've been a big advocate for pushing the legalization of rhino horn, and now that it's taken this massive step in the right direction, I'm super excited. So I thought, why not? It's breaking news. It's very important for the greater scheme of conservation. Let me mention that out to you guys. But the real reason why I'm back in studio tonight is all about my dear friends, influencers, content creators, however you want to see us. What are we doing, guys? What are we doing? Yeah, I think I've touched base enough on my perception on people that label it free range, right? I think I've done enough of that. I think I've touched half ends definitely more than one occasion on this podcast. So I'm trying to think how I'm going to start off this segment, because I want to give my perception on why it fumed me the other day. Anyway, I was out, came home. It was a Sunday. I plunked myself down on the couch, got horizontal, kicked off my shoes, and I started flicking through YouTube. Of course, I'm a professional hunter. I love hunting. What is the first thing I do? I go and look at hunting videos. So I'm flicking through, and something that pissed me off quite a bit was the American side of things, where certain individuals, certain influencers, I'm not going to mention any names, but I'm sure you guys have seen it. I'm flicking through and I see public land, and I hunted this hog free range, and what was the other one? Mule deer, New Mexico, public land. The other one, out of half fence, access deer. And I started scrolling down, and then I get to the South African segment, and free range kudu hunt, and the one guy from Tanzania, free range buffalo hunt. And I'm like, okay, like, yes, I get it, but why do we have to justify? Like, because it's free range, or your perception of free range. Look, the Tanzania one can be argued, but because it's public land, does that justify your kill any more than what it needs to be? Now, why do I have an issue with this? Because hunting should be hard. Hunting should be something that's difficult. But in the same breath, it should be something that's honest. I've always tried to depict my situation as honest as I possibly can. Numerous amounts of times when I find myself on certain programs that I've been fortunate enough to be on, and again, I don't want to mention names, but if you guys have followed me for some time, you would know what I'm talking about. Often there were times where we got ourselves into a position where there was a fence in the background or a road. There were numerous amounts of scenarios where we couldn't pull off the shot that in that particular segment. And it bugged me. It really did. Because we got into good positions. We worked hard to get to that position. But because there was a fence in the background, we never took the opportunity. Now, there's a reason why this bugs me, is because that if the cameras weren't there, we would have taken that shot. Ethically, non-ethically, everyone's going to have their own opinion about it. But I believe that I would never take a shot if I've cornered an animal. I would never take a shot if I don't believe that that animal doesn't have a fair opportunity to get away. But that's just me. I know there are different individuals out there that shoot off bait sites. Shooting on bait sites also can be argued. There's so many things that can be argued in these scenarios. But I hate the fact that we have to justify why our episode should be any better. And I feel like it's a very cringy clickbait sales gimmick to say public land or anything like that. Like, I get it. I understand that it is a much, in theory, it should be a greater achievement to have shot a bull elk on public land while bugling it in, compared to going down to Texas and shooting in a half fence run. So I get that. But when different scenarios are taken up, we need to embrace the greater scheme of hunting. So why do we have to mention public land? The individuals that hunt consistently and are ethically hunting these animals on a consistent basis would understand the sacrifice that goes into hunting a bull elk on public land and bugling it in. Understand that completely. But it doesn't mean that kill is any more respected than the one down in Texas. Because who knows how that individual had hunted it. And yes, it is half fence. And yes, it might be fed pellets during drought season and stuff. But we created these ecosystems that we have to look after these animals on. Both aspects of it, of serving their purpose in the greater scheme of conservation. Now, I am not going to generalize and say the majority of individuals that hunt their animals in half fences and all that sort of stuff do it unethically. I think for what it's worth, the greater part of individuals that hunt within half fences and don't hunt free range animals and don't hunt public land, they do it ethically. I hunt half fences. I do. When I go meat hunting or when I go and do something and I have the opportunity, I shot my Bontebok this year in a half fence. I shot my Impala in a half fence. I have opportunities to go and hunt these animals in free range areas, but I don't see a greater achievement between the two. My Impala, I worked my absolute arse off. It took me 4 days to get my Impala. My Bontebok, okay, it took me 1 day, but I'm on a roll with that at the moment. My free range fellow deer took me 1 day. The different scenarios. I don't feel it's necessary to go and label my YouTube channel, my YouTube thumbnail, and say free range fellow deer. There's no justification for that. And I'm talking from my personal perception, but I get a lot of great positive feedback from my podcast, and I'm forever grateful for that. And I don't get much negativity from it. But I want youngsters, I want individuals, when they listen to this podcast, I want them to take this in and just think that they must not have the perception that we need to start labeling one another. oh, but Remy Warren only shoots things in public land. Yeah, that's like, I get that. That's him individually. But if you want to follow that route, by all means, no one's discouraging you from doing that. But if you also want to have a hunting experience in a half fence area, that is possible. Yes, I say this with absolute understanding, that I understand that there are 30 hectare plots or 30 acre plots that people hunt animals on. And I understand that people do it unethically. I understand if you go into the Limpopo province and it's so thick there and you can't see from side to side, and it's 100 hectare camp and people are using high powered rifles. I understand that. I understand that people are doing that. You get it in every industry, but I'm not talking about them. The people that are on YouTube, that are putting out episodes on YouTube and on Carbon TV and all these other platforms, I immediately justify them as ethical behaving individuals. I don't want them to label their hunt, because I'm starting to feel that it becomes a dick swinging competition. If you don't have public land or free range in your title, people discredit you almost immediately, and that is a bad thing for the hunting industry, on my personal opinion. I don't feel it's right. I feel, as much as we possibly can, when we put content out there, it has to be as authentic, organic, and ethical as possible. And if that means that there's a fence in the background, that's fine. We shouldn't be seeing that any different to the achievement than what it is. I do cringe when I see that. I'll be honest with you, it's not my thing. I hate shooting animals up against the fence. It's not what I want to do. I don't do it. If I can avoid it at all costs, I do. But it does happen. So share the ethical side. Share the true story behind what really goes on there. And I know there's a lot of people out there that do this for popularity purposes, do it for lifestyle beliefs, do it for sponsorships and all that other sort of stuff. I know in South Africa that's not a big deal, but in the States it obviously seems like it's a massive industry that kind of gets tapped on quite a bit, which is great. But do it realistically. And I think as hunters, we should all be banding together and encouraging one another to praise people that hunt these animals in half fences. It doesn't have to be public land, in vast acreages of game ranches. Embrace that as well. We don't have to completely segregate them because they shot the animals in a half fence. It shouldn't be like that. We should be embracing one another, enjoying one another's content. I still watch these guys' content, and it's great content. It really is good content. And I'm grateful that these guys are taking the time, spending the money, because I know what it costs to run a YouTube channel, especially when you aren't getting funded. I know the time it takes. I know the effort it takes. I know the constant battle of trying to get subscribers and all this sort of... I get that. But we don't have to go and cheapen ourselves by labeling our hunt as any better than anyone else's. Every hunt should be looked at equally. But guys, again, that's just my opinion. I could be completely wrong about it. But I got absolutely disheartened when I flicked through YouTube, and I got to a point where I was just like, you know what, like, I'm gonna watch this video, but at the end of the day, I'll always have it in the back of my mind that this individual I'm watching doesn't see me shooting my bontebok in a half fence any better than him shooting his mule deer in public land. So, yeah, look, I mean, it's just one of those things. That's just my personal opinion. That's just how I feel. But I'm hoping, I don't hope it changes. I just hope people's perception, people might open up and warm up to the fact that, you know what, maybe it's not necessary. Anyway, that's just me. Guys, some updates that's happened. I had Josh Name out a couple of weeks ago. He had an absolutely incredible time. It was so cool to see an individual come out and embrace the hunting industry. He's never been a hunter, but he really wants to embrace what it's all about. He feels that it's a primal instinct he needs to connect with. So I'm really looking forward to that episode launching on his channel. So stay tuned for that. I'll definitely share it as much as I possibly can. But we're nearing the end of the season. We've got November and the podcast shuts in December. And then we've got show season. So much to talk about. I'm hoping to get out there. Look, a lot's happened in the past couple of weeks. And I'm sure I'll share this with you on more episodes of the podcast. But for now, it's not looking good. However, I'm going to hold my head up high and hope for the best. Stay optimistic about it. But like always, this episode was sponsored by Lumens. I'm so grateful, guys. Thank you so much for the incredible Godox light. I feel like I need to adjust it a little bit, but this episode of the podcast came out beautifully. I'm so happy. I'm really looking forward to the next couple of upgrades. We've got a couple of new things coming along the way, and I'm super excited about it. So stay tuned for more. Like always, if you are, happy hunting. Until then, stay safe, stay blessed, and stay humble. We'll catch up with you guys soon.